Okay. Where was I? Yes, so there's this interesting kind of like switch from industry. So the kind of like the cry for years and years was that they wanted more digital experience and knowledge, and I think there's now an expectation that that is kind of embedded within somebody's studies. What's new that's come back that I've been noticing recently is a call for drawing and hand rendering of designs as a recognised bonus to a CV. So it's good to see that side of education coming back. Got it. So what might we consider as being the key challenges that the HE sector has been facing? A large part of the challenge lies in the changing landscape of education in schools, primarily through government intervention as opposed to considered choices made by schools and the teachers themselves. The focus on STEM subjects and the switch to an EBAC approach has left many subjects, including the arts, struggling to attract students. And severe funding cuts have meant that schools have needed to make tough decisions, which has led to practice-based subjects, such as textiles, being closed, as was noted in the all-party parliamentary group report written for the National Society of Education in Art and Design. Gosh, it's a good job I didn't have a drink before I tried to say that. Further to this, and what I recognise anecdotally has been a specific challenge for textiles, has been the move to safeguard certain subjects by incorporating them into the design technology teaching. While I applaud the maintaining of this subject, I have noted over the years a distancing from textiles as students no longer understand textiles to be a valid subject in its own right. For example, a lot of students recognise textiles and its production as being an element of fashion production, and therefore are guided towards a fashion degree, when in reality, as taught degree programmes, they are most certainly entwined, but they are very separate entities in terms of learning, development and career direction. As a result, at university, we see quite a proportion drop out of a fashion degree totally or transfer to textiles. I do not doubt that a lot of students are attracted to the excitement that fashion brings, but it does make me very upset when it becomes clear that they were inspired and motivated by fashion or interior design, but it was the making of the textiles, the experimentation with materials, or the creation of surface patterns that held their genuine long-term interest. Whilst it is great that students have the opportunity to transfer, and sometimes you just need time to rule something out, the reality is that it's very stressful for the students and often expensive, as majority will need to step back a year because they've simply missed too much of that core information and insight that I mentioned earlier, that industry is really, really kind of like driving HE through. So, and I suppose there's another further reason for resitting a year is that we find almost all students come to study textiles, and that's either directly actually or as a transfer, thinking they want to do one of two things. They want to do surface pattern as embroidery or print, okay? In reality, actually, most students find after a term of exploration, they find just how broad textiles is, and actually they don't go down those routes. They find that there's other things that really, really interest them. So the reasons for this are fully understandable, as majority of students going to university have had minimal access to specialist equipment, or have not even realised that something was an option for specialism, such as making materials from food waste, jacquard weaving, hand tufting. So as a Facebook member of this group, I feel that I've been seeing a lot of kind of like posts where there's a lot of teachers moving towards art textiles. And I think it seems a really positive thing for me from a textile perspective, as opposed to a fashion perspective, as there seems to be less emphasis on a full product and students can really focus on the textile elements if they wish. However, I would say I may have completely misunderstood the difference, and so I'm waiting to be corrected on this after this talk. So I'm interested to hear more about that actually. I'm also aware that the requirement for the number of core subjects has been reduced, I believe, this year, and will hopefully open up more opportunities for subjects that were marginalised previously. Essentially, I am hopeful that a focus on textiles as a product in itself will inherently promote textiles as a direction for further study. So I hope what I'm saying here is not coming across, or is coming across, as I intended. Okay, I recognise the intense pressure that people teaching in schools and colleges are under, and so the focus of a paper I presented recently at the FutureScan 5 conference in Leeds, primarily to lecturers in fashion and textiles at British universities, was that we in the HE sector needed to act with urgency to help create and extend the network of support that is out there for teachers. I speak to people who are now teaching textiles but are trained in food and catering or PE. I'm not denying their skills and enthusiasm, but I recognise they need to be provided with insight into the potential for someone who may go on to study textiles at HE level. I personally live in a region where the whole heritage is built around the woven textile industry. And even here, people still ask what jobs people can do in textiles. And we've still got some of the best mills in the world on our doorstep. There is no doubt in the industry has changed, but it's actually bigger than it ever was. I had been told, but I don't quote it because I don't have the reference, that it's actually the biggest industry in the world. So that's quite a good point to consider, I think. I think there's also a further challenge that faces us, in that the exam boards seem to have kind of like a drive towards products that move beyond just material, when in reality, aside from the kind of lucrative craft sector, designers of textiles and surfaces would not actually be involved in the making of product that utilises their cloth. And so not so much of a challenge, but an observation that has in the last 4 or 5 years become really apparent, and I think not so much of a surface throwaway comment, I suppose, is there is a genuine sense of students wanting to change the really poor, sustainable and ethical record that is rife in the textile and fashion industry. Universities are pushing this narrative, and the directions they take and these issues really are something to behold. And one of the books I've got to show you kind of talks through, I guess, a bit about one student's journey for that. To boost this, having a clear and fresh set of resources that any tutors can access and translate beyond upcycling and within your insanely tight budgets would be a step, I believe, towards changing the narrative of the global impact of the fashion and textile sectors. So what can or should we be doing to save textiles and go against the tide that is falling numbers, which really is quite alarming when there are so many viable career opportunities out there for graduates, particularly when you consider its global opportunities. While I recognise and celebrate the great work being carried out by the Textile Skills Centre and Dawn and your wonderful team, I feel more needs to be done by other invested groups. Having presented the paper earlier this month at FutureScan, members of the FTC, or the Association of Fashion and Textile Courses, and potentially the Future Fashion Factory, confirmed that they are wanting to launch a programme of supportive resources specifically aimed at textiles. I'm hopeful that a more collegiate approach from universities may help to flip the declining applications. So just before we open up the conversation, I just want to say that I will be doing some practical based tea and chats in the new year as well. I believe they are being listed on the website, so it'll be great to see some of you for that as well. But with my practice-based sessions, feel free to just join us with a cup of tea as well. I don't want it to feel like there's any pressure to have to do things, but there will be a list coming out as well of the things that you would need if you want to join in with the session. I normally do more practice-based workshops and actually don't do talks like I'm doing this evening. My workshops are taught so they can be translated for multiple levels of study, from primary through to BTEC, and they utilise materials and tools that are generally cheap or to hand. Thank you. So I'm interested now in having a chat. I'm going to switch off my PowerPoints. And so if we have any questions or thoughts, just discussion, then let's see where we go with that. Otherwise, as I said, I have got some books, some online.
Shall I start just giving you a cross-reference of the people that we have with us this evening? We do have quite a broad range. It's really nice to see what everyone's done for a degree, actually. We've got graphic designers, we've got architecture, we've got someone who studied German. I love that. I hope you speak German. Imagine just turn up to teach a textile lesson in German. That would be amazing. We've also got obviously many people that have studied fashion design. Textiles and metalwork is quite an interesting one as well. Sculpture is another one that was studied at uni, and home economics. Woo! I wish we taught that. So a lot of mixed backgrounds in terms of teaching. I would say that the majority, 90% or more, are teaching GCSE at least, and some are doing A level as well. And it's actually really nice to see quite a few D&T specialists on, because usually I'm the D&T specialist and Nikki's the art textile specialist, which means we're usually competing. And I think we're getting a few more here tonight, Dawn. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I've spotted that. Yeah.
EdExcel. Sorry, I'm pro D&T. Don't hate me for it, but I'm pro D&T. And obviously my degree was at Huddersfield, just putting that one out there. Yeah, so a really good cross section of people here this evening. There's one lady, Supriya, I think. I don't know if she's got her mic or anything on. She's here somewhere. She's actually conducting a research paper on the importance of textiles for an academic paper, which is quite interesting. We're excited to talk to her some more and read that, which is really exciting. There she is. Hi. So yeah, lots of exciting people on the line.
Hi, Supriya. Do you want to actually explain what you're doing?
I do. I'm excited to know.
Sure. Can you turn that down? So I'm doing a paper. It's a research for a master's, and I'm really passionate about getting it out there once it's written in front of policymakers, because where my background is, I did product development in fashion, and then went into the fashion industry and worked as a designer, but more of a business person as well in fashion, and very passionate about the sort of you could say lucrative careers and possibilities that are out there for creative industries, especially obviously my field being fashion and textiles. But generally I was very passionate about that. So I went into teaching, and I trained and taught textiles as well as art and DT, which I shouldn't have done because I knew nothing about it. But so we had to do it. Obviously, you have to do all of it. So specialised then in taught textiles for a few years. But my experience was that, as you say, it was really it was cut out of so many schools and treated as really unimportant and swept aside. And I could not believe it, because coming from, being in the industry for so long and seeing everything having been exposed to the vast industry, like you said, it's if not the biggest, one of the biggest industries. And so that's where the passion for it came from. And so I've been researching, just a few minutes, okay? Lie down. So I've been researching it, talking to teachers. I would also like to further this and do further study and talk to higher education students about their experience. Now they've been through the sort of academic route of maybe some of them didn't have the choice of textiles at school. But anyway, so now I've been interviewing teachers about their experience of textiles in their school, to highlight the importance of what they're teaching and how they feel about it. And so I've got quite a good collection now, and just sort of putting it all together and looking at the data. And it's just wonderful to have met, all these passionate textiles teachers around the country. that are real, really pushing it, and all of the one thing that the common thread that everybody said is it's the passion of the teacher that comes through and inspires the students.
I would
So
I reckon
I'll agree with that.
that sort of sums it up really. And Nicola, you said something earlier, and it just reminded me when I was up, even at art college, doing a foundation, we saw, and probably other people might be able to relate to this, they showed us a video, which was rare, then, but they showed us a video of the textile designer, and they showed her really struggling to make money, like after 12 years of graduating. And I just think that's just so like what the myth is out there, that it's either creative or it's, being able to support yourself. And so that's also what I wanted to expose, in this paper is the vast opportunity that's out there and it starts in the classroom.
That sounds amazing. I can't wait to read it.
Sounds brilliant.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And also tomorrow's my last day of interviewing. So if anybody has any time, sorry to put a bit of a minor
We'll
thing.
charge you later.
Yeah. So yeah, if anyone has any
I'd
time.
happily do one if you want me to, Spray. You can send me an email or a message. I'll do one for you.
Lovely. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Spray.
Thank
If
you.
you're wanting a perspective from somebody in HE, tutor in HE, then I'm happy to provide.
I would love that
perspective on that
yes.
as well. So, but I think there's just been from industry. I feel there's been kind of like a which is textiles all over. I have to say, it's not fashion. It's a textile thing. Is that there's just a kind of like just a quietness about how amazing this is as an industry, and really not celebrating it or kind of like shouting it from the kind of the rooftops, that there are all of these things going on, tend to be kind of quite grounded. I don't know if that's even the right word, but yeah, I think this is what I was meaning by, I think there are so many different parties that I think need to get involved with kind of like promoting. I think the British wool industry seems to have been the kind of like the main kind of group in the last few years, 10 years maybe actually.
Wool for schools, isn't it? They're massively.
Yeah, the wool board.
QA, I think they're doing a lot of projects with students.
It's definitely not being shouted about. I having had experienced the last 10 years in the knitwear industry, they really struggle to get anybody into those factories, and they're fantastic factories, really highly skilled people, really good wages, really loyal teams that get involved, and yet they can't recruit. People just don't know about it unless you know of a factory in your town or somebody that's working there. They don't go into schools. I've tried to get schools into some of these factories and they're just not interested. You just think
that baffles
you're
me.
Cutting your own nose to spite you.
I've been doing the D&T spec. The massive part of OCR is manufacturing. That's 0.8. It's huge, and I just think I could cover all that theory in just one factory visit, the whole lot. I could do all of it. I could talk about the difference between mass manufacturing and bespoke. I can talk about the different machinery and scalability and all of that. Health and safety, QA, QC could literally be done in a day's visit. Obviously, we'd need follow-on, but it baffles me that people don't go to factories.
I think it's as much to do with getting out of school, because in the past I have tried doing factory visits where factories have said, bring them in. And I've tried to get teachers out of school to go into factories, and schools just won't let them out. And I think it is this whole thing about textiles not being important. It's very, very frustrating, and I don't quite know how we change that. It has to come from the top down.
It would be good to hear from, I mean, I can see some familiar, I think Julie's been here before, haven't you? And Anne, you've been on the calls before, I think. But it'd be interesting to hear from you guys, because, I mean, I've just organised my first trip and the paperwork was horrific. That's what would put me off. organising trips is the paperwork, the sheer amount, the weeks involved in getting all of that together. But it'd be interesting to hear from you guys whether, you know, visits and things are on your agenda.
I think the other big thing that you mentioned, Nicola, was sustainability and climate change, and how schools are delivering that into in the classroom. It has become a much bigger and much more important issue over the last couple of years. And I think, Rachel, you're now sort of leading something, aren't you, in your school about climate change and sustainability. What we're hoping to do is do a big event in March, which is online, and it's the theme will be sustainability, and we're bringing people in from hopefully some of the top brands like Marks and Spencer and Primark, and we're bringing some people in from industry to actually talk about how they are changing or moving their big machines to actually become, as in the companies, to actually become much more sustainable in clothing, and how they're looking at all the different like recycling, reusing, all the rest of it, and how they're trying to introduce all of this and doing it themselves. But we also need to know how this can be delivered in school. So hopefully we'll get some good teachers who can talk about this at the event. But I think that is another really big important issue that's becoming urgent and becoming very important in actually getting it across to young people. I don't know how how anybody else is tackling sustainability and climate change in school, but I know it is a big issue at the moment.
I just was reading Anne's comment. She said that she does a trash and show. Is that like upcycling product? I'm hoping that it is.
Yeah, can you hear me?
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I do it as an extracurricular club, and basically they have to bring rubbish in, and then we make it into garments. So we've had all sorts. We've had a dress made from tea bags, you know, crisp packets. We've just done one with empty pill packets, and we're quite heavily involved with Dr. Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots. So we show in London at the Barbican Centre. We've not done it for a couple of years, yeah, because of COVID, but that's something that a lot more schools could get involved in. It's become a bit of like a St. Christopher trash and show thing now. We kind of we have the finale of the Roots and Shoots Award show, and it's amazing, and it really inspires the students, and it boosts my numbers.
That sounds so good. Are you aware, Anne, of all the new climate action that's come in from the Department for Education?
No, I don't think I should be, but no, I probably not.
I'll drop some links in the chat box for you. It'd be worth having a look at.
Yeah, that'd be good. We have a really good what's she called? What's her title? It used to be Director of Sustainability, but she's now got a bigger. This is one of our SLT. She's now got like an enrichment role, but she pushes it a lot.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Has anybody else got anything that they want to add or ask Nicola while she's here?
Am I allowed to ask another one, or am I just being that person that takes over?
Yeah, just take over.
Just one quick question, because Nicola, you mentioned when you were talking about the decline in higher education, you mentioned STEM on there.
Yes.
Are you thinking that STEM and what's the other one called? EBAC.
Yes,
are you suggesting that deters people from what was your
yes
thought?
Yeah, well, I think because of the kind of like the move towards STEM, rather than, I know there was a kind of like a push to try to change it to STEAM, but it kind of, well, ran out of steam, didn't it, really? So focus was on the STEM, so it just, a lot of students were kind of like directed away from subjects which kind of enabled students to go on to study those at higher education level. So that's where I recognised. And then the EBAC, which I know is kind of, seems to be I don't know if I'm right in this, but there seems to be a turnaround again back on that. So, but it was so, there was such a dictation, wasn't there, about the course, the subjects that you could study, that again, it kind of knocked out a lot of the arts subjects, because there was
it kind of
only
makes it clash. I mean, for me, and I'm sure it's the same with other subjects,
Yeah.
we battle media because we're in the same block as them. So
Okay.
there's a lot of subjects where we now battle it out because of the way that you have to choose a humanity. I remember when I was at school, you had to have a D&T. Like, that was a thing. You had to pick one of them.
Yeah, but now that's not an option, is it? Because of the way I recognise as the government has kind of like changed the way that the system works. So
So Nicola, do you think that you said that the industry is calling out for a lot of things, but do you think that there's less uptake at high HE level as well? Is that what you're saying?
massive drop, probably a 70% drop in applications. Courses are closing.
That throughout textiles, in sort of all different aspects.
But also across kind of like other areas. I think it was in the news, wasn't it, a couple of months ago, all the English literature courses basically were being kind of like just slashed across the country. And it feels like textiles might be kind of like on its way towards that. So which is just absolutely alarming, because there are so many jobs. I mean, my understanding when I interview students and when I kind of go and meet students at colleges and schools, one of the things, the kind of the key things, which is, I guess, is different from when I went to university, was that they are all genuinely and rightly so worried about a career and what jobs they can get. They're paying a lot of money for it. So what jobs can they get from it? But the thing is, there are the jobs. That's, I think, the thing that kind of like really concerns me. And universities are kind of like, there's a bit of a squeeze. So from the university, the pressure, apart from kind of like research and all of those things, in textiles, the squeeze is coming from industry, who are wanting very particular kinds of graduates to come out, which actually are pretty impossible to kind of create. And then you need to have kind of creativity and kind of enticing subjects to get students to come into it. And so management are going, oh, they seem to kind of listen to what industry wants a lot more, whereas academics seem to be kind of like more focused on what teachers and students are all saying about what they want a textile education or fashion education to look like. So there's quite a challenge there at the moment, I would say.
So you're saying that they need to match up in a way?
Yeah.
have a discourse or something.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And maybe the universities are the people to make that happen, because that's where the squeeze seems to be kind of like impacting most. So I think industry kind of like bodies need to be far more supportive of what's going on in schools and going into schools and helping and creating kind of like environments where students can go and visit the mills. I was thinking earlier on when you were talking about doing visits, aside from all of the nightmare that sounds like paperwork for getting schools to go out on visits, I was thinking, oh, well, some people offer virtual visits of mills and things, but honestly, there is nothing like the smell and the sound.
No, it's the scale. It's walking in the factory. Even at Huddersfield Uni, though, we had that because of the size of the machines that we were fortunate to have.
Yes, absolutely.
Julie, is your hand up, or is that just a click in an error? It is up. Hi.
Hi Nicola, thank you. It's really reassuring to hear that there are jobs out. For obviously we are in schools and we are quite isolated quite a lot of the time. We have a big A-level cohort. We have between sort of 25 and 35 A-level students every year doing art and design textiles. I really, my question is a bit of a concern about, like you were saying, that link between schools and higher education. That our local foundation provider has just closed their course, and for us, it's, you know, do we encourage more students to apply directly to places like Huddersfield, for example? In the past, you know, the odd one gets in direct, but generally most higher education want the foundation. And it's just really to get your opinion on, what we would do, because our nearest BTEC foundation is probably nearly 20 miles away, 25 miles away for our students. And we have about 7 or 8, 9, 10 maybe go on to foundation every year.
Right. So where are you based?
In Canterbury, in Kent.
Okay. All right. I mean, most textile courses that and tutors that I speak to, a lot of tutors from across the sector in textiles, and I'd be really surprised. There's probably a few universities that still insist on the foundations, but most actually don't now. And I would say that's been the case. And I would say most universities, the kind of like the balance between students has been about a third of each. So a third who have come direct from A levels, a third from BTEC, and a third from foundation. And I would say, and a lot of people here have probably done a foundation in the past. Don't want to make too many assumptions about people's ages or anything, but I would say that the kind of, from our perspective at university, as a first year student, foundation students are way ahead of the game, actually. So there's no doubting that the foundations have really kind of boosted their thing. How the strange thing is, or maybe not so strange, particularly for courses that have placement years, Huddersfield does it. I would say in final year, there is you can't spot the difference really between the foundation students and the non-foundation students. So I think it does even out by final year, but that first year is a heck of a lot more bumpy if they haven't done a foundation. But there are also a lot of kind of like A-level courses now as well who kind of adopt a lot of the foundation kind of thinking about kind of like playful approaches to creativity and mark making and experimentation. And so what I do notice is students who have come from A levels who are doing courses like that, actually the kind of like the problems are kind of like much more kind of like minimized, I would say. But
can I add in my claim to fame, Nicola? I've got Keris on the line. She's going to shout at me for saying this, and she won't turn her mic on, I doubt. But Keris is from Bridlington, where I'm from, and she did an A-level at Bridlington School, doing art textiles. She's actually got a scholarship at, well, I don't know if it's a funded scholarship, is it, Keris? But she's working for Jimmy Choo in London now. She's going to his college. Yeah, so she's on the line listening to us, and she didn't do foundation. She went straight from A-level and managed to get accepted into such an amazing college. So yeah, it just goes to show, doesn't it, not everyone needs a foundation.
Yeah, I do think there is a difference at the early stages, but yeah, so a good degree kind of like evens that out and stretches that out. So I would say that I wouldn't worry about sending your students directly to universities, but I would definitely say it's probably more important for them to go to open days and get a real sense of, I always say to students, because I used to do all the tours at Huddersfield, and obviously none of them have bought houses, the students that I'm taking around, or very few of them have, but I always think it's that thing that we all know, even when we're growing up, that apparently when you find the house that is going to be the one you want, you just feel it's right. And I think it's the same for going on an open day at university. You walk in and you kind of just get a sense of whether it's right. We still interview a lot of students who haven't even been to an open day. And so when they get to the university, they're surprised at kind of like how vast it is and what the kind of like facilities are. And then they talk about other places they've been, and they're like, I thought that was normal, that there were 3 looms, but actually you've got 75 looms. Why have you got 75 and they've got 3? Those kind of things. So that would be the main recommendation I would kind of like have, if you don't. I'm sure you're already.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. And that's great, because actually I think there is a shift, as you say, you're finding recruitment harder as well in universities, and actually I think we need to remember that, and that's something that then filters down, that actually 10 years ago when I trained, actually it was a bit more competitive, if that's the case, and maybe less now. It's shifted a little bit, so thank you.
It's completely shifted. So 10 years ago, we knew how many students were coming, and we could make decisions based on our offers, based on kind of caps and things. But that when the cap was lifted, we lost that control completely, which I actually think is a good thing. So, but it does mean that I would say students getting into university is more straightforward if they're prepared for it.
Thank you.
Okay.
We do have as well, Julie, I don't know if you saw, we do have a whole careers, loads of videos and a chat with another Nicola Redmore, also from Huddersfield Uni, about getting into uni, preparing portfolios and all of that side of things as well.
That's good.
Dawn, I can see you talking, but your mic's
Yeah,
off.
I was about to say, I think we're coming to an end now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicola. It's been really interesting. I think we've all found it very interesting and eye-opening in lots of
I hope it shone a bit of a light on what
the
situation is. I think it's not spoken about very much.
No, and I think the thing for me is that we've seen this coming for quite a long time, and the universities have been the ones who've been the slowest to actually react. And I think it's because they didn't quite realise what was happening in schools. I mean, this has been going on for like 6-7 years, and it's a slow, you know, we could see it happening almost immediately in schools, and it's been the universities who have eventually realized that if students aren't being taught in school, then they don't have that experience or understanding or knowledge, or if they haven't felt, or you know, in terms of textiles, they haven't had a go, then they're not going to apply, you know. Unless their family, you know, somebody in their family does it or whatever, then they're not going to apply. So universities have now got to start shouting from the top down, or from the top up, actually, because our voices weren't being heard. So hopefully people are now actually awakening to this fact that textiles is hugely important to this country.
It's all on Sophia and her paper. It's all on you.
Yeah, surprise. Yeah, it's hugely important.
Heavy shoulders.
It's hugely important to this country in terms of like the GDP that we're, you know, we in textiles and as an industry, as Nicola and Spry have said, is huge in this country. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest industry in this country, in the world. And we just, the government is not supporting it. Basically. Anyway, hopefully that's been food for thought for lots of you tonight, and thank you so much for coming. Don't forget, we're back in a month's time with another, I can't remember who's next, actually. That's really awful, isn't it? But we're
in front of me
It's
as well.
Louis.
It's
Louis
Louis
talking about paths to apprenticeship, Dawn.
It's Louis talking about apprenticeship.
Paths to apprenticeships.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect in combination with what I've talked about.
It is
That's
absolutely
great.
We might be missing one. What about Imagined Futures on the 4th of October?
4th of October. That's, in fact, that's the next one, isn't it?
Yeah.
We slipped one in there.
Polly. Yeah, the MA student.
There's an MA student who is writing a thesis on an imagined future, and this is all about recycling and sustainability. Yeah. Perfect for actually using in school, in classroom, actually. And it's you know, looking at 2045, what will we be doing if a certain scenario is set up? And I think it's a really good discussion point. So yeah, that's the next one. Hand over to you for the last bit, I think, Rachel.
Yeah, so I've shared a lot of links in the chat box, so if anybody wants to have a scroll back through those, anything anyone mentioned, I tried to slip a link in there at some point. Do check out the website for all of our free resources. This particular event will be uploaded tomorrow towards the end of the day, or maybe the day after. Let's see how busy Dawn is tomorrow, where you can download the resources from today as well. And just finally, a quick note that we always do, we are a team of volunteers that host and run all of these events for you, including the organisation of the website and the free resources. So if anybody would like to donate to our lovely cause, I've also just popped a little link in the chat box as well. Even 20p helps. I'm from Yorkshire, we don't mind. So yeah, that's our last little plea. Do keep in mind the Facebook page and the Instagram for any updates. And if anyone's got any questions, please do email any of us, Dawn, myself, anyone would be happy to help.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really cool comments as well. If anybody wants to get in touch with some information or
Yep.
questions or things that universities can do to help, just get in touch and I'll pass things on to
Amazing,
the
Nicola.
appropriate people.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Right, I'm just sending you my email now. I'm sending you my personal one.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.